Joining the Center Square Daily to discuss that is our Washington Associate Editor, Carlene Johnson. Carlene, your team recently uncovered internal emails with the Washington Attorney General's office and others as they crafted the millionaire's income tax that ultimately passed. Now, it seemed they were angling to use the new law to get a favorable ruling that could run contrary to the state constitution's clause of not taxing income. You were recently in front of the Attorney General, Nick Brown, and asked whether this shows they were aiming to break the state constitution and bypass voters. Here's his response.
Well, I would disagree with your framing of it, but it is very common for AG's offices to advise their clients on the law, the status of cases, analyzing prior Supreme Court decisions. It is something that we do on a regular basis. It is something that all of my predecessors have done. So yes, I think it's pretty common and appropriate. If you look at the email communications, my Solicitor General and people in the office were talking about how this, because it's raising revenue, couldn't go to referendum. So we weren't trying to bypass the voters. We weren't advising the legislature how to do that. We were explaining what the state of the law is.
What's your interpretation and your team's interpretation of what that stack of emails showed?
Yeah, 988 pages from the Office of Attorney General Nick Brown sent to my fellow colleague here, investigative reporter TJ Martinell, all unredacted, Greg. It was highly unusual because at the top of every one of those pages, it said attorney-client privilege. So oftentimes, when you get those public documents back through a records request, a lot of it's redacted. Nothing was redacted here. And it showed very clearly, and I have to take issue with AG Brown's response to my question at the press conference on Monday. I take issue with him saying that it wasn't a suggestion that came from his office to make this bill, Senate Bill 6346, the millionaire's tax, referendum-proof. It was, based on the documents we obtained. It was Noah Purcell, Washington's Solicitor General under the office of AG Brown, who suggested to the bill's sponsor, the prime sponsor, Jamie Peterson, you might want to think about adding a referendum here. Otherwise, this is going to go to a vote of the people. This is a budgetary item, so you should probably, what we call, make it referendum-proof, bypassing a vote of the people. So that's what I was pushing him on yesterday. He said it was not a big deal that his office made that suggestion.
Well, this is a big deal because your guys' reporting there in Washington State seems to have changed the arguments in court of those who are looking to try to get this law reversed. Talk a bit about how the reporting from the Center Square has impacted that lawsuit.
Right. All of these documents now publicly available. We've linked them in our series of articles going back to the beginning of last week. So these are documents that we've been told may very well have some impact on litigation. We have an attorney through Citizen Action Defense Fund, Jackson Maynard, and they have secured former Washington Attorney General Rob McKenna and former state Supreme Court Justice, a Democrat, Phil Talmadge, to kind of lead the legal case. And they are getting, at least initially, some expedited review plans on that. It was filed in Klickitat County Superior Court because that's where a couple of the plaintiffs are. But the defense, the state's going to have all of those documents as well, all 988 pages. As we kind of suspected, they've been somewhat dismissive of the relevance of those documents. Folks backing the lawsuit believe it may well prove what they've been suspecting and alleging for months now, in that Democrats knew full well they were crafting legislation intended to force this to go before the state Supreme Court and eventually a vote to the people, but that'll have to be done through initiative, likely not for referendum. That was their goal.
It's fascinating when a court case happens and there's litigation, there's always discovery, and who knows, maybe the plaintiffs in this case could have gotten these documents in discovery, but that probably would have been weeks, if not months down the road in this case. The Center Square, the Center Square putting in that FOIA request and getting those documents way in advance of that seems to be something, again, shedding light on this entire situation. So where is the case now, and how, what's the trajectory of this? Is there going to be finality within the year, within 3 years, within 6 months? What are we looking at?
Right. Yeah, that's a good reminder, because there will be nothing quick about this at all. The filing in Clickitat County Superior Court, what if they get a favorable ruling there? Of course, the other side is going to appeal. It is likely probably late in 2027 before this would go before the state Supreme Court. Meantime, Greg, we could have a ballot initiative, or potentially two initiatives on the ballot this year. You've got backers seeking a referendum, and there's appeal on that this week before the state Supreme Court, a hearing we will be attending on Thursday. Not likely to prevail there, because in the past, our state Supreme Court has said, if lawmakers want to make it referendum proof, who are we to say it's not really a critical, necessary to the budget? So based on precedent there, it's unlikely the referendum attempt will succeed. But then those same folks, Brian Haywood and Let's Go Washington, will likely be launching an initiative campaign, only just a matter of months to gather somewhere near 400,000 signatures. They're confident they can do it, though, and that would put it on the ballot this November.
Well, it's clear you're reporting getting a lot of attention in Washington state, taxpayers wanting to know what exactly is going to be happening with this. So guaranteed the team from Washington state will be on top of this, not just with the print reporting, but also with the daily show, the Washington in Focus Daily. So be sure to check that out and stay up to date there. But obviously, we're talking about the litigation here. We're talking about the ins and outs of courts and what the timeline's going to be and legal arguments and whatnot. But what's the practical impact of this so-called millionaire's tax on taxpayers in the state of Washington?
Right. There's been a lot. Supporters say it's the millionaire's tax. Only the very wealthy going to pay 10% above their, $1 million threshold. So make $1.2 million, pay the 10% on the $200,000. Not a big deal for rich people, right? The problem is the way this bill has been crafted, Greg. It is passed through businesses, and about anywhere from 70 to 85% of small businesses in the state of Washington run as pass-through entities. So you, as the owner, your business might have a good year. It shows up as personal income on your income taxes, and you'd be taxed on that. Doesn't mean you're a millionaire. It means you had a good year, and you might want to invest in some new equipment. Maybe give your employees a year-end bonus. Not going to be able to do that. It is going to have a crushing effect, as we have been told by the Small Business Administration, by National Federation of Independent Business and their Washington connections here, say this is going to have a crushing effect. Not only that, the inventors, the next Microsoft, the next, Starbucks, they're not going to choose to locate here because of the millionaire's tax. So far-reaching consequences, potentially years out, lots of litigation, as you mentioned. But there is huge concern that this is the death blow, the final tax death blow on an already overtaxed business community here in the state of Washington. I'm hearing a lot of concern about this.
Meanwhile, another litigation in Washington state, controversial law impacting local voters' choice for sheriff. That's also in the courts. We recently had some attorney representing the plaintiffs, Mark Lamb. Here's a bit of what he had to say to the staff at the Center Square on this ongoing litigation.
Our argument is that this is a prior restraint on elected officials' right to speak, write and associate freely with whomever they would like to, and that this imbues control in Olympia that would overrule the will of voters throughout Washington state for all of the counties of Washington state, and saying you don't have a right to elect a sheriff. And I think it's really critical as well for the office of sheriff. There's a direct linkage between the people and those who have the right to use deadly force against our fellow citizens. Wherever you fall on the political spectrum, we should want direct accountability to the voters.
Carlene, obviously, you've heard from opponents of this. They're in the courts, and they say that this is taking away that local voice. What was the rationale from the supporters of this measure to make a non-elected board of bureaucrats to be able to reverse the will of local voters? What was the rationale behind supporting that?
That's a critical question, because during all of the testimony, the public testimony, there were many hearings that were crammed with people in opposition. Supporters kept saying, we need this because we should have our elected officials, they should have to have a background check. There should be all kinds of checks and balances to make sure that there wasn't anything questionable in their past that should preclude them from serving as an elected sheriff. The problem with this bill, though, according to opponents, including the 4 sheriffs that are taking their case before an emergency hearing on Wednesday at Thurston County Superior Court, which we will be there to cover, their contention is, wait a minute, I might have posted something on social media 10, 15, 20 years ago, and now as an elected sheriff, somebody at the Criminal Justice Training Commission, a governor-appointed board, says, I don't like those guys' politics. I think he should move to be decertified. That's where we're at. And that's some of the constitutional issues, the free speech, First Amendment issues that are being brought up by folks challenging this bill.
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable. And again, just a couple of stories of all of what you'll find at thecentersquare.com. Be sure to subscribe to the newsletter and also get Washington in Focus daily with Carlene Johnson and her team from Washington State. Greatly appreciate you taking the time. We'll check back in soon.